Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Welcome to Window on the West, where we explore all the ages of Tolkien's Middle-earth, with your hosts, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on Window on the West. My name is Jonathan Watson. I'm here along with Michael Grumbine.
Hey.
And Dan Dan isn't here today. Dan has a lot of work. He actually works at the Babylon Bee, and they've got a big event this week. So he is out of sorts and not really even much in town at this point. So we're doing this without him. Our Hobbit isn't here.
That's right. Well, I mean, in a way, it might be a little appropriate because lots of people fall by the wayside in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad.
So he's our first casualty.
He's our first casualty of this battle.
Nice. So with him not being here, if you want to leave us a review, you can dock 1 star on iTunes or Apple Music or Apple Podcasts,
right.
wherever, and Google. Since Dan's not, actually no, maybe you give us 1 extra star since Dan's not here. I don't know.
Ooh.
Oh, Dan, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. But yeah, do that. Leave a review. We really appreciate those. Gets more people involved. Gets more people in the discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, give a thumbs up, like, subscribe. You can become a member. It's $5 a month on Amazon. You get access to our Discord. You get access to the extended podcast, which we release usually a couple days early through a link in Discord. And you can actually get custom emojis and custom little avatars, loyalty badges, I think YouTube calls them, so that when you comment and when we do live streams, eventually you can get all those too. So that's $5 a month there. Or you can go to theonering.com/patron and pay $4 a month and get all that except for the little emojis. And it's less because we don't have to pay the YouTube overlords for their 30% pound of flesh. So
always nice to avoid the overlord.
Yeah. The less we have to pay them, the better. So go to theonering.com/patron and join up there. So today we're going to go over the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Fifth Battle, Chapter 20 of the Silmarillion. However, even with Dan not here, before we do, we're going to embark on
All that is gold does not glitter.
So today, Michael, it's on you. I'm sorry, but I think you might succeed, and this could be interesting. Instead of doing quotes, and if you're listening to this here, maybe you should jump over to YouTube or Rumble and check the video, because we're going to be identifying the cameos in the Lord of the Rings films, if you can identify them.
Ruh-roh. All right.
All right.
This is in my faith, this is a day of penitence.
So here we go. This picture is a picture of a wet, sodden man eating a carrot in brie. And I don't know, was this the original? I think it was only the extended edition. Maybe it was in the original. Now I can't remember. In any case,
I only watched the extended edition. So
exactly. So the point is moot. The other one does not exist. So
this, I do know this one. So this is Peter Jackson.
It is Peter Jackson.
A cameo in his own films. He had, I believe, 2 cameos. This was one of them.
Yeah. And I think honestly, I will say I kind of hate cameos in films because it takes me out of the movies, and I'm like, oh, look, it's Peter Jackson, while I'm in the middle of Brie and I'm actually already sunken into the story, and I see the director and it takes me completely out of the films, and I kind of hate that.
But in this case, I was distracted by the carrot, so the first time I saw it, I didn't notice.
They dangled the carrot.
Literally.
Oh man.
It's for better.
Who knows? Maybe
better
we'll
than the
see.
stick.
Does James Cameron have a double in Avatar? Does he get his own cameos?
He's the whale in the latest one.
Oh, he is. Well, he compares himself to Tolkien. We'll talk about that in the extended podcast, which you can get if you become a member on YouTube or a patron.
Well,
so yeah,
everyone's comparing themselves to Tolkien these days.
It is, yeah. Vin Diesel, the great giants of our culture. I guess. All right, next one. Here we go. These are the kids. So you obviously won't recognize the kids, but 2 of these kids, I think the middle one and the second, the boy second from the left, the girl in the middle, right here. These are the kids who are who are cheering for Gandalf's fireworks in the Fellowship of the Ring.
I recognize that.
And so this girl right here in the middle, who with her hands up and her mouth open, and this boy over here with his mouth open and his arms down to his sides. I'm pretty sure those are the two children of a cast member or a production person on the Lord. And you would know the person, obviously. It's not like, the second grip.
I do not know this one. No.
Okay. Take a guess.
Of who they might be.
Whose children these might be.
Don't
Round
tell me.
face, curly hair. Who do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't tell me it's Rudy's kids.
No. She's at the end of Return of the King, actually.
That's okay.
Yeah. These here, should I tell you?
Sure.
These are Peter Jackson's kids, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, that's his daughter and his son.
I thought, well, should I guess Peter Jackson again? No.
Yeah,
Make me sound dumb.
Yeah. All right. I know that one was a little.
Peter Jackson's got cute kids. Look at that.
Yeah. All right. Next one. This is from the prologue where we see the 9 kings with their rings. So nine rings for mortal men doomed to die. And so here the cameo is actually, let me zoom in on it for you. Over here, second from the left, this guy right there, I believe, yep, right here, this guy right here in the middle. Who is that? You may recognize him from some behind the scenes, and he's known not just for his work on the films, but on some Tolkien stuff prior to that too, prior to the films.
That's good. I don't know.
He was one of the lead artists for.
This is Lee. This is Alan Lee.
Yeah. No, that's John Howe.
Oh, that's John Howe.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. So I didn't actually know that until not too long ago.
That's awesome.
But he certainly looks, I mean, if you look at him, he's got a really good beard going on there.
Yeah, he's got a good beard. I mean, is it his beard or did they give it to him?
I don't know. I didn't get that detail. But it's definitely him. So yeah.
I mean, it feels like a John Howe. It feels like a John Howe beard. So I'm going to say it's real.
At least it wasn't
awesome.
front and center.
I did not know that. Did not know that.
Like Peter Jackson carrying a carrot. They stuck him to the side, so he's not quite as distracting. Okay, next one, and there's only 2 more, and the last one is a bonus. So let's see if you get that one. Well, so the next one here.
I'm surprised I got even one. So there's that.
This character first appeared in Fellowship of the Ring, and then was also in Return of the King with a line that was like, "My lady, where are you going?" This is when Arwen is going to the Grey Havens and decides to turn back in some point in Return of the King, and this person has won an Academy Award, and this person was part of a comedy duo with a show on HBO, and he got the name Figwit, Figwit, because
there are so many clues. I feel like I should know this, but I'm terrible with this stuff.
That's all right. So this person, he let's see. So apparently somebody in some screening before it was released or something like that, was saying, this was in Fellowship of the Ring where he doesn't have a line. She was like, "Oh man, Frodo is great," and then said, "Who is that?" when she saw him, because he's so attractively elven. But Figwit, Frodo is great, Fig. Who is that? Wit, Wit. Anyway, so a comedy show on HBO. They do touring. He won. Here, get this. He won an Academy Award for writing the music. I believe it was the best new song for a film for The Muppets. Am I a Muppet or a Man? For the Muppet movie that came out like 10 years ago. He wrote that song. He wrote all the music for that. He is Brett McKenzie from Flight of the Conchords.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It doesn't really
oh my
look
gosh.
much like him, but that's like curlier hair and you would recognize him probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Brett McKenzie.
That's impressive.
So he's got Lord of the Rings and the Muppets.
That's funny.
Jermaine Clement has Moana. Because he sings the giant crab in that. So anyway,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah. So it's funny. He was really there. I believe there was no Flight of the Conchords at this time that was popular at all when he filmed this in 1999. And he was a lot younger then too.
It's the hair just throws me totally.
Yeah. He does look elven though. It's a good look.
He does. Yeah. No, he's got the facial structure. Well, I'm getting rolled over on this one. I'm
It's
not a
okay.
Hollywood.
That's
insider
actually
guy.
a feather in your cap because you know the books better than you know the films.
I know.
You see? You see how that works?
I do have a hard time caring about the movies.
All right, especially the random injections of real life into it that where we're supposed to remember who's who and what's what. All right, so bonus. Here we go. Do you know who this is?
Oh yeah, but is that a Photoshop?
No.
It's not.
Okay, so this is a guy in some armor with a red kind of cloak around him, red hair. He likes singing songs.
Yeah. No, it's for heaven's sake. Yeah, my daughters love him. Just hold on.
All right, if you guys know it, put it in the comments below because
yeah, it's Ed Sheeran.
It's Ed Sheeran. All right, there you go. Yeah,
I was like trying to wait, but so this is not a Photoshop. So
no, this is from Game of Thrones. I'm sorry, I had to.
Oh, you did. Oh, that's why. It's like the heck. This is not from Lord of the Rings.
No, yeah, no, he's not. It's not from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had to throw it in there because this is one of the worst cameos ever, where they do like really him right in the middle of the what? This makes absolute like they didn't even try to pretend it was him. He's got the exact same everything going on with him here.
So at first I thought you were going to throw me a curveball by putting in a Rings of Power, but I knew Ed Sheeran was. But then I have to tell you, my honest to goodness thought process was okay. So I know this guy, and I was like trying to remember what the artist's name was because I don't listen to his music, but. But my daughters do. But I was taken by the fact that I'm looking at his outfit. I'm like, that's really good armor. There's no way that was in Rings of Power. so this is not Rings of Power, and I know this. And I know this is not the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, and I don't know what the heck is going on here.
Sorry. Like I said, bonus, but you got half of it.
So this is from Rings of Power. Sorry, this is from. Is this from House of the Dragon?
No, it's from Game of Thrones. He was in.
It's not the prequel, but the
Yeah, the original. I don't know. He was in some
rando shot.
Random, yeah, I don't remember when. Anyway, well, there you go. So
all right, I got the bonus guy, and even though I didn't know where it was from, then I got Peter Jackson. That's it.
There are a bunch of other cameos in the Lord of the Rings, like producers and second directors. I think Andy Serkis even is he in that one? I can't remember now.
Serkis was I thought he had a cameo as himself. I mean, not in mocap in The Hobbit.
Oh, that's true. He did. Well, he played Smeagol.
No, not just that. I thought there was another.
Oh, in The Hobbit, did he?
I thought so.
I don't remember because he was the second director on that one.
Yeah, but I thought he put himself in one of the scenes. Like it's like a battle scene, or maybe it was the destruction of Lake Town. I thought. Yeah. Anyway, maybe not.
Well, anyway, however, let this be.
If I were you, what I would have done is, as the bonus, I would have put the sandworms of Arrakis coming out of
a mountain.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
the sandworms cameo. The Hobbit. I don't even think of those movies as existing, so they didn't even enter my mind.
I wish I had that strong of an imagination that I could just purge them. That would be fun.
Yeah, I just forgot. What are you going to do?
But they are not allowed in my house. We do not own them. We are not allowed to watch them until my children are adults. Then they can ruin their life as much as they want. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day somebody will take it once copyrights have gone, which is another thing we're going to talk about in an extended podcast.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
What happens when you change stuff like Roald Dahl and his books and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and all those things?
Spoiler alert, it doesn't get better.
Not in this world. All right. So let us jump in to chapter 20 of the Fifth Battle, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such an odd word, but yes, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. And so, as always, we will start with
Dan's Big Thoughts.
Oops. Well, he's not here, so
yeah.
I've got a thought this time. One thing that struck me reading this is that, I have a friend. And this friend, when he watches films and movies, there are very few shades of gray in his assessment of these films. Either they're the greatest thing ever, or they're the worst thing ever, right? And so he ended up getting the nickname the King of Hyperbole, because it wasn't like, the movie was fine. It was like, oh, that movie I couldn't say, had all these problems, and the plot was just ridiculous, and the special, right? Everything is really bad, or everything is really great. So it's funny because in Tolkien, he tends to do the same thing in a way, right? He like when we hear about things, it's always the greatest battle ever, the greatest thing ever. And so even with Beren and Luthien, right, it was the greatest thing to ever happen in that an elf or man performed, right? The greatest deed. And then here we learn that it was the greatest grief that Melian ever had. And so it's funny when he mentions these things, there isn't really much of a shade of gray. It's like, it was a great grief. It was the greatest grief. And it's not like I went through and I found them all, but it struck me that he does that a lot. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just noticed it. And it's a thought.
Right. It's a element of myth, right? You have to have
That's
the
true.
the heights and the depths. Now, what's interesting to me is that for the published works that he published, I don't recall him
As the published works he didn't publish, as opposed to those.
Well, he didn't publish the Silmarillion that we're reading, right?
I know.
So,
All right, okay.
in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is what I mean. I don't recall him doing that very much. So I think there's probably a filter, unless, in other words, you see it tremendously in the Silmarillion, especially in the Tale of Beren and Luthien. I mean, there's so many, like the saddest song ever sung to Mandos by Luthien, and I mean everything is taken to 11 in that story, and so there's much of the what's that? So the superlative is the technical term.
The hyperbolic superlative.
Right.
I mean, we have. I just did a quick search in Lord of the Rings, and so we have Aragorn by Aragorn. Gandalf calls Aragorn the greatest traveler and huntsman of this age of the world. Elrond is the greatest of lore masters.
Nice.
Let's see. Yeah, those are a couple. There, I could find some other hyperbolic terms of sorts. Hyperbolic isn't the right word, but superlative terms.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
But he does that a couple times. Not.
I retract my statement. Then he does do it a little bit.
But is it if it's only like if it's the guy who came in second place? Is it a story worth reading about anyway? Right? Like, would we want to hear about the second greatest traveler ever in the huntsman in the age of the world? He was bested by this guy, but this story is the one we're going to talk about.
That's right. He's the also ran the bronze medal for hunting.
So, all right. So that was a thought. But let's get through this battle. It's kind of
the tale starts actually by finishing up with Beren and Luthien, which is always interesting to me because we just read about the tale of Beren and Luthien, but for some reason Christopher Tolkien puts the end of that tale in the first paragraph of the Fifth Battle, which is odd because it literally doesn't have anything to do with the Fifth Battle. So I've always wondered why does he, like, this whole paragraph, the whole opening paragraph should just be in the end of the last chapter. It's got literally nothing to do with the Nirnaeth Arnoediad.
Yeah, the only thing that I can think of, and I didn't find any evidence to back this up, is that this is how Tolkien actually separated it when he started writing it. Right there in his manuscripts, there was a separation. This is where he started the battle of the Fifth Battle. Because is there anything in here? No, even I was like, oh, but he mentions Dior, and Dior's in. No, he's not in the battle here. So no, yeah, it is an odd start. But it's when I first read the Silmarillion, I was like, oh, nobody ever saw Beren and Luthien after they came back from the dead. And the second read through, I was like, no, wait, they did see him because that's when Melian, they went to Doriath, and Melian, realizing that she will never see her daughter again in the circles of this world, because as a Maiar, right, she would be able to go to Valinor and the halls of Mandos and all that sort of stuff,
right?
But she'll be gone. She doesn't know, right, the unknown of the gift of men is hers, and that probably bothers her because she doesn't know what to expect for her daughter anymore. She doesn't know what's going to happen. And so it's an interesting effect. Like it's a different kind of grief than we would have as, you know, as a Christian, as a believer, that there is more than this life that we are here for. But there's the hope of the future, right? There's the hope of the eternal. And so for her, she kind of lost that hope, I think.
Mm-hmm. And hence, then you get the superlative that you mentioned, that no grief or loss has been heavier than the grief of Melian the Maya in that hour.
Yeah.
So, yep, it is. I mean, Tolkien, I think, is just emphasizing the difference. You know, there's something so mysterious about the gift of death to men, and it goes beyond just the fact that they don't know where they go. But in the case of Luthien, it creates its own tragedy between her and her mother, where all of a sudden she's separated from her by fate, and her mother knows there's no loss, but there's no way she's going to see her again, but there's also your memory that you had of no one ever spoke to him is not unfounded, because it says no mortal man ever spoke ever again with Beren, son of Barahir, and none saw Beren or Luthien leave the world or marked where at last their bodies lay.
Yeah.
So there's no men that speak with Beren. So it's interesting because this is entirely from the elves then, because there's no it's interesting because Beren and Luthien have become both mortal. I mean, Beren was already mortal, but he's been brought back to life. Mm-hmm. And Luthien has become mortal, brought back to life and become mortal. So it's interesting.
They never, as far as we know, they never leave Tol Galen, right? Tol Galen.
Right.
As far as we know. So they, even though Dior is the heir to Thingol and ends up taking the throne, they never...
Tol Galen, right?
Tol Galen, yeah. They never return to Doriath as far as we know. I think.
It says they go to Doriath, but yet after that. Yes. And one would think that they didn't go back to Doriath ever again, because otherwise the thought of Melian wouldn't have been true.
Yes, good point. All right, so there you go. The end of the tale of Beren and Luthien in this chapter.
We couldn't get away from Beren and Luthien. We were sucked back in. All right, but now begins the beginning of the end of the true doom of the Noldor, and it starts with the only one of Fëanor's sons to have any sort of nobility, which is Maethros.
Which, if you'll remember, he's the guy who did not partake in the burning of the ships at Loskar.
And he was pinned to a cliff by Morgoth and had to have his hand chopped off. So he has one. This whole one-handed thing Tolkien seems to like it.
He could be Camlost too. He could be Maethros Camlost.
That's right. So it begins with him trying to. So he's heartened by the fact that Beren and Luthien have pulled off the stealing of a Silmaril from Morgoth. Or I should say the recovery, not the stealing, because Morgoth didn't own him. And so, heartened by that, he tries to build a force to actually take on Morgoth's armies and assault Angband through a kind of trickery or strategy whereby he can first destroy Morgoth's armies and then assault.
And then what's interesting is how Tolkien phrases his response to what he thinks he can do with Morgoth. Now Morgoth was not unassailable. He lifted up his heart. And I'm like, I'm not sure how to interpret that exactly. He had more than just a logical understanding of the situation. Like he felt it more than he thought. I'm not sure what it means. He lifted up his heart, perceiving that Morgoth was not unassailable. Did that strike you as interesting at all? I just don't know where to go with that.
I didn't actually notice that lifting up of his heart thing. I mean, I read it, but I hadn't remarked on it. He would probably be the only son of Fëanor to lift up his heart because he still had one. Whereas, there's Celegorm, Curufin, all those guys. We're not gonna give them the time of day anymore. All right, so let's move on from that. So we were given an accounting essentially of the gathering of the armies, who was there and who wasn't there. So essentially, of the Noldor, Fingon, son of now slain Fingolfin, is the High King, and so all of the Noldor to the west, which are in the lands of Heathlam, of the west of Angband, they gather up their forces. To the south of them, Nargothrond is an elven stronghold, but nobody comes from Nargothrond. So they're not, except one small group, Gwyndor, son of Gwilyn, a very valiant prince. Sadly, very valiant and also prone to madness prince.
But because his brother Gelmir was lost in the Dagor,
which we'll see, it's used against him. So
let's remember though, the reason that we don't have anybody from Nargothrond coming, and it's only Gwyndor, son of Gwilyn, and a small company, is because, of course, Celgorm and Cúrfin and all the crap that they did to get rid of Finrod. Finrod? Yes.
And they turned the people against him, and then the people of Nargothrond then basically became isolated. They self-isolated, and so no one except this one prince with a small company leaves.
And that holds true, because then Thingol does the same, right? He's angry at the sons of Feanor, the same ones. And he's not going to send anybody else out either, even though Melian counseled Thingol to actually give up the Silmarillion and the Silmaril and not keep it for him. But every day that he looked upon the Silmaril, the more he desired to keep it forever, for such was its power.
So this is I found 4 major parallels with events that happens in Lord of the Rings with this. This is one. This is a parallel with the ring itself, of course. That the longer you have it in your keeping, and the more you look upon it, the more you desire it for yourself. So the Silmarils and the One Ring have a strong parallel. There's this idea of an item of power when held to oneself and kept for oneself, you begin to hoard it more and more. That Tolkien is tapping into. Yeah.
Which we did talk about. Was it an extended podcast last week or week before, where we talked about like how similar and how different are the Silmarils and the One Ring, and we won't get into that. Into that here. So they're missing Nargothrond. They can't get Thingol. Turgon is hidden, and they're
right. So they don't know what's going on with him. So they have nothing from him, at least at the moment.
So the 3 great kingdoms essentially are like, nope, don't think we're going to help. Well, at least to them, they don't think, they're not getting those, and so but Maedhros still pushes forward.
Yeah, I would count the Noldor in the east as their own kingdom. They kind of rule
the
themselves.
Havens and Círdan, right? Yeah.
Oh, there's that too. Actually, no, I was talking about the elves. Maedhros and his brothers that dwell in the east.
Sorry, east, not the west. Yes, correct.
I count them as different from the elves of Mithrin, who are with Fingon. So you have Fingon and his kingdom in Mithrin, or Heathlam, I should say, and including Mithrin. And then you have on the map that if y'all are looking at the YouTube or the video, it's the area around Lothlin essentially, and that has all the remaining sons of, and that's in the east, has all the remaining sons of Feanor.
Right.
So those are the 2 kingdoms that are going to go, and they're going to pull off this pincer move of a kind. They're going to try to draw out Angban's forces into the plain of Ardgallen, and they are going to crush them between the 2 armies. That's their idea. And it is specifically mentioned that both armies, both elves of the Noldor of the East and Noldor of the West, have allies among the men that they bring with them, and of the various tribes of men, and it goes into some detail. And then, interestingly, Maedhros in the East also has the friendship and help of the Naugrim, or the Dwarves, and much is made of the Dwarven male and their warriors. And so they come from Nagrod and Belagost, the 2 Dwarven kingdoms. So there's a force of dwarves as well with Maedhros and his eastern Noldor. And then there's also green elves. Apparently, there's some of those. So anyway,
from Osirian down there, yeah. And then also probably some men.
Right, men from that area, and also men from Forest of Brethil, and the men that dwell in Heathlam with the Noldor.
Yeah. So they start this or they move forward, it it bothers me a little bit that the men are kind of the turning point to all this sort of stuff still, and I understand now why they have why Thingol seems to distrust them. But it's the men, right? Like the men from the Haladin of from the House of Haleth, who, if you remember, was the woman who saved her people as they retreated from the Dimbar, the Ered Gorgoroth, as they made their way westward, essentially around Doriath.
And they settled in the forest of Brethel.
Right, which is right here. So the elves, the men, the dwarves, as Tolkien writes, on the appointed day on the morning of midsummer, the trumpets of the Eldar greeted the rising. Oh, did you want to say something else?
No.
Okay. On the appointed day, on the morning of midsummer, the trumpets of the Eldar greeted the rising of the sun, and in the east was raised the standard of the sons of Fëanor. In the west, so in the east, right here, the standard of the sons of Fëanor over here, and in the west, over here, Lothlin, Ardgarlan, right over here, and in the west, the standard of Fingon, the High King of the Noldor, over here, right? Like you were saying, the pincer move to come in to Angband. But Morgoth knew what he was doing, because he already had, like I said, he had deceived the men, or he had brought them to his side, and so the guile of Uldor the Accursed deceived him with false warnings of an assault from Angband. So that means that Maedhros didn't make haste to do battle. Right? He was holding back because he thought there was going to be a pincer move on him coming from the rear. And boy, this is like this is the most I've ever gotten into this, the details of this battle, because looking at it on a map and reading it through the stories is like the only way to really, truly understand what's going on. But it's at this point when Maedhros like deceived him, right? And so Fingon realized he wasn't coming. Turgon,
Maedhros did not deceive him. Maedhros was deceived.
Maedhros, right, exactly. Sorry, I misspoke. Turgon opened the leaguer of Gondolin and come forth with an army 10,000 strong, with bright mail and long swords and spears like a forest. And I'm not even going to try to say what he shouted, but he essentially said, "The day has come. Behold, people of the Eldar and Father's men, the day has come." Which, when you think of it, it's like 10,000 people in Gondolin in this one city. It's got to be a pretty big city if that's just the people going to battle. It still struck me as it's hard to imagine how large Gondolin is, even with some of the imagery that we have that's beautiful from Ted Nasmith.
Utulian aure. It's the the day has come. It's a beautiful saying.
Yeah. So this is when I think we need to talk about what really, well, do we want to get into Gelmir, because that's pretty brutal. Gelmir.
So yeah, we have to. So what I did have an interesting thought where, Sauron sends his forces out from Angband and they go to the west, so they go towards Ithilcirion. And what's important is that all of the Noldor of Fingon have holed up in Ithilcirion, and their idea is, we're not going to go out and be tempted by the army. We're going to wait for them to come to us, so that when Maedhros finally does come, the army will be crushed between the hammer and anvil, they being the anvil probably. And so they're going to stay there. And so Morgoth sends his army out, and there's this funny phrase where he says he sends them out dressed in dun, so that and with no naked steel, and so that they aren't seen for a long time. And I thought of the orcs from Rings of Power, where they're sort of all in this color, where if you imagine at this point Ardgallen is all destroyed, and so it just looks like it's like a wasteland. So if they dress in the color of the wasteland itself, they would be hard to see for a while. But anyway, they eventually show themselves, and the captain, it says specifically, but the captain of Morgoth in the west had been commanded to draw out Fingon swiftly from his hills by whatever means he could. He marched on, therefore, until the front of his battle was drawn up before the stream of Sirion, from the walls of the forest of Ithilcirion to the inflowing of Rivell at the fen of Serek. So anyway, he does in fact bring out the other son of Gwilyn. So this is an elf of Nargothrond, a prince of Nargothrond that has been captured, and proceeds to do horrible things to him. And this is where I saw the second parallel. The horrible things he does, he cuts off his arms, his feet, and then eventually decapitates him in front of, it turns out, his brother, which is what leads to the flaw in the plan. But before we get to the flaw, this was the second parallel that I saw between this battle and the Lord of the Rings. Actually, the second and third. So, in the Lord of the Rings, Sauron specifically sends out an army, a great army, but not his greatest, to assault Minas Tirith. In this war, he sends out a great army, but not his greatest, to attack the elves, and hopefully draw them in. And then he taunts them. If you remember in Lord of the Rings, when they come before the gates of the Black Gate, where behind which lies the greatest of his armies, he's taunted the heralds. The herald of Sauron, in this case, the mouth of Sauron, taunts Aragorn and Gandalf and the company with tokens of their friends. Right. And in this case, there's a parallel where Morgoth's heralds taunt the elves with their friend, literally in this case, their kin, and proceed to do horrible, to slay him in front of them in a horrible way. And so in both cases, it spurs a reaction, although very different kind of reaction in each case. So and not only that, like similar, didn't they also go ahead? I was just saying, similar narrative element. Tolkien's using a similar narrative element, which for him, it's not a flaw, it's not a bug, it's a feature, because for him, everything that came before it echoes into the future, and so the fact that there are similarities between tactics, Morgoth and Sauron, is no accident.
Yeah. So that sets Gwyndor off, and as Tolkien writes, his wrath was kindled to madness. There we go. And he leapt forth on horseback, and essentially at this point, all the host of the Noldor was, as Tolkien says, set on fire, and they all jumped forward, and they got all the way to the gates of Angband. Like they made it. Straight.
Well, and not only they make it, they just absolutely laid waste to Sauron's Morgoth's second best army. So they did, and in fact, it almost backfired against Morgoth. He just wasn't. I don't think he was expecting that much. So the elves. These are all the elves from the west. So this is the heathen elves led by Fingon and the small company from Nargothrond. So and interestingly, Tyrion. Sorry, not Tyrion. The elves from Gondolin do not show up. Are not part of this attack. They've stayed behind,
as they were supposed to.
Guarding as they were supposed to. So the elves, but all of Fingon's army ends up at the gates of Angband and actually blasts through the gates, and they break it. They actually break the gates down, and they enter into the passages leading down into the tunnels in Angband. And it says specifically. Let me just see here.
Is it Morgoth trembled upon his deep throne?
Yep, and they burst through the gate and slew the guards upon the very stairs of Angband, and Morgoth trembled upon his deep throne, hearing them beat upon his doors. Which, again, a reminder that Morgoth is not a courageous being. He's trembled before Fingolfin. He's trembled before the elves at the gates. He'll fight if he feels he has to, but he's no alpha warrior in that sense.
Yeah. But at this point, they realize, we went too far. Our phalanx drove too deep, because at this point, they are captured, and the phalanx of the card. Okay. Is it here? This is so complex, but at what point does Morgoth release the rest of his army? It's right here, right?
Yes. So he said,
by many secret doors in Thangorodrim, Morgoth had let issue forth his main host that he held in waiting, and Fingon was beat back with great loss from the walls.
So you have to recognize that what's going on here is there's a kind of a funnel at the top, at the gates of Angband, where they go in, they break through the gates, but then they enter into this secondary area. Right. And on the zoom in, it's above the word Dataloth, under Dor Dataloth, and so their forces have kind of been funneled through. They've broken through gates, and then they're at the stairs in the tunnels, and then Morgoth basically releases all of his armies from the entire range, or at least the front part of the range, and by secret tunnels. So they surround the elves, and this is their main host. So the elves at this point, who have been fighting for days, I believe, actually.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a short distance. I mean, we're talking miles and miles and miles and miles of fighting. To Angband.
Because I quote, "Then in the plain of Angfoglyph, on the fourth day of the war, there began the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, unnumbered tears." So they've been fighting for 3 days across the whole plain and just blowing through his army. So the elves have been fighting for 3 days. So this is not, so in other words, if our readers or listeners remember how unbelievably unstoppable the Noldor were against the armies of Morgoth, which appear to be mostly orcs and trolls at this point, then they might think, okay, so they just blew through one army and then a second army surrounds them, so that's going to be hard fighting, but how come they don't just sweep through that army too, or at least not have as much trouble? And the answer is, I think, when I'm thinking about it from a military historian perspective, they've been fighting for 3 days and through an entire army, and then they all of a sudden become surrounded on all sides, and our army, far greater than they ever could imagine, pours forth from Angband. So they almost go down in that, and they fight all day for the fourth day, and all the next day. So they fight now for 2 more days of straight fighting, being pressed upon all sides and getting basically driven up to into some hills, and then they are relieved by the army of Turgon from Gondolin, who has come across the plains during those 3 days, and like a river of steel in the sun, as it says, and he breaks through and he meets his brother, says his Turgon, brother of Fingon. And that's my final parallel. There's the meeting of Turgon and Fingon, and it says, "Now the phalanx of the guard of the king broke through the ranks of the orcs, and Turgon hewed his way to the side of his brother. And it is told that the meeting of Turgon with Hurin, who stood beside Fingon, was glad in the midst of the battle." So, sorry, Turgon and Hurin. So remember, Hurin has lived in Gondolin, and so that reminded me, like the 2 armies, one beleaguered and one breaking through with fresh forces, and then a glad meeting on the field of battle with much battle to ahead of them, reminded me very strongly of the meeting of Eomer and Aragorn on the plain in front of Minas Tirith, when Eomer is beleaguered and is losing and is going to be destroyed, and then Aragorn appears from the river with a fresh army of soldiers, not undead green men as in the movies, but actual soldiers of Gondor, and relieves him, and their meeting is glad upon the field of battle. So there's that parallel.
And it's at this point too that Maedhros comes.
Yes, and then so now you have 3 armies of elves, and now it looks like even this massive, unbelievably huge army is not going to. They're going to turn the tide. They're going to win, and then Morgoth plays his final card, which is all the uglies,
the wolves, the wolf riders, the Balrogs, the dragons, and
Glaurung. Right. So you have all the. So presumably we didn't have any Balrogs or dragons, and maybe not orcs. many wolves, orcs and trolls, I would believe.
But let's remember too that Tolkien wrote that it wasn't the wolves or the Balrogs or the dragons that won the battle. It was the treachery of men. Because of Ulfang, who attacked Maedhros from the rear. He went over suddenly to Morgoth and drove upon the rear of the sons of Feanor. And in that confusion, they came near to the standard of Maedhros at that point. So, and I love that. We'll find this later, but I'll say that like they were what they were given was essentially their big reward for being on Morgoth's side that we learn is they got to chase the bedraggled women and the leftover elves in Heathlam, the old, the young, the children and the women. Yeah, so they got nothing, and they got pent up. These betrayers, Morgoth gave them a land, but it wasn't the one that they wanted. It was a harsher land. It was the land of Heathlam, the land of mist and shadow, and forbade them to leave. So we find that out near the end. But in the meantime, we have
the beasts. The beasts have come from Thangorodrim, and so Balrogs, dragons, wolves, and they make a lot of Glaurung. And it turns out Glaurung has become larger and fiercer, stronger, and he withers is the word that Tolkien used. He withers all before him, elf and man. Turns out, what you need to fight Glaurung? Dwarves. With the war masks. Pretty awesome. So,
this is something we're missing in all the battles of Middle Earth. Is we saw. Okay, I don't count the freaking end of the Hobbit movie, but like dwarves in battle frenzy against something like a dragon, I would pay money to see that. I would.
This would be a fantastic movie to order. Scene from a movie, and so we do have to read it. And it said, last of all the eastern force to stand firm were the dwarves of Belagost. So that's the southern kingdom of the dwarves. And thus they won renown. For the Naugrim withstood fire more heartily than either elves or men, and it was their custom, moreover, to wear great masks in battle, hideous to look upon. And those stood them in good stead against the dragons. And but for them, Glaurung and his brood would have withered all that was left of the Noldor. But the Naugrim made a circle about him when he assailed them, and even his mighty armor was not full proof against the blows of their great axes. And when in his rage Glaurung turned and struck down Azagal, lord of Belagost, and crawled over him, with his last stroke Azagal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. Then the dwarves raised up the body of Azagal and bore it away, and with slow steps they walked behind, singing dirge in deep voices, as it were a funeral pomp in their country, and gave no more heed to their foes, and none dared to stay them. So there's a funny in a one, not haha funny, but funny scene, right? Because the only thing to stand against the dragons that successfully is the dwarves, and not only they stand against him, but the Lord of Belagost deeply wounds Glaurung, and Glaurung flees, and all the beasts go with him. So you got the wolves and the other dragons that flee with him, and it says that the dwarves also fought off other dragons as well, because it said Glaurung and his brood. So the dwarves do this monster task, and then they take their king and they sing a song and leave. Which is kind of weird if you think about it.
Although, I mean, in a way, it's like once the dragon and the other beasts are gone from the eastern front, they kind of more or less have won most of that battle. Almost.
Right. That's what I picture. So I also picture them like that whole flank being overwhelmed by beasts, and the dwarves fight them off, and the beasts flee. And so in this wreckage and whirlwind of everything fleeing, the dwarves just take their king and leave to bury him. But what's interesting is there's still battle raging in other parts. So the dwarves are an interesting story here, because they don't fight to the end. They don't do what the men do. We're about to hear what happens with the men. And this is not, so the men and the elves are of a closer kinship than the dwarves and the elves. This is very clear. Even the dwarves fight valiantly and in fact drive off Glaurung. So,
and it's in the west that the Balrogs have come. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can take a little bit of a detour here to talk about Balrogs a little bit, because one of the things that always bothered me a little bit about the portrayal of Balrogs from Peter Jackson's films was their size. They are giants. They're huge. They're kaiju. They're monsters, right? And I don't think Tolkien ever meant them to be that large. Certainly, perhaps they could grow that large. But in this battle, for instance, like it's a battle with axes, and it takes two Balrogs to take down Fingon. Yeah. Yep. So I don't know. Like that.
Originally, to the way Tolkien describes the Balrog, and in his text, the Balrog is actually about 13 to 15 feet tall. He's not. Really? Okay. He's not a kaiju.
Yeah.
So, which is the theme of our last two episodes has been kaiju. So,
and if you don't know what a kaiju is, think of Godzilla.
Right. So this is not. So the Balrog, which by the way, I actually gave props and still do to Peter Jackson's portrayal of the Balrog. I see its size and the way he's portrayed as something which is, although not explicitly the way Tolkien describes it, it creates in a visual medium like a movie. It creates the right kind of fear. See, you remember Legolas is almost completely unnerved by just the sight of the Balrog.
I think it's the only time we see an "ai" in the books.
He basically screams.
Yeah.
So there had to get that same visual effect in a medium like a movie, you have to. I think Jackson did a good job. I have no qualms about that. But as far as the mechanics of him fighting, the Balrog, while about twice the height of a man, Balrogs were about twice the height of a man or elf. They weren't these 30 to 50 foot monsters.
Yeah, and it takes 2 Balrogs to take down Fingon.
Right.
And at that point,
of which one of them is the captain of all the Balrogs, it's Gothmog. So he's fighting Gothmog and apparently to a standstill at least. And then another Balrog comes from behind and gets Fingon with a whip.
And it's in this Western Front, it's like the inverse of what happened to Glaurung happens here, whereas they've killed the High King of the Noldor. And so at that point, the very next sentence after, thus fell the High King of the Noldor, and they beat him into dust with their maces, and his banner, blue and silver, they trod into the mire of his blood. And then the very next, the field was lost. We lost our king. The field was lost and bloody. And it's at this point that the main characters that we will come to know, or their offspring come to know in the next chapter of Hurin and Hura and the remnant of the house of Hador stood firm with Turgon of Gondolin, and so they battle. And Hurin tells Turgon to leave. I'm gonna essentially secure your retreat that you go on. And Hurin has an interesting insight now. Right? He has foresight in the same way that even Melian did.
It's a prophecy, really.
Yeah, it's a prophecy. He says, if Gondolin stands but a little while, then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with eyes of death, though we part here forever, and I shall not look on your white walls again, from you and from me. Kind of prideful. A new star shall arise. Farewell. A new star, which, of course, we will see what that ends up being. But it's at this point, Maeglin, the son of Eol, right? Yes. The dark
correct.
elf who Erithel was his wife. He stood by hearing these words and did not forget them, but he said nothing.
Maeglin's is like
he's
dun dun dun.
Yeah, right. It's not like Celegorm's smile, but it's this silence and dread that he's like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something, and we'll find out what he does in the Fall of Gondolin. And so at this point, Turgon leaves. Hurin and Hura secure the retreat, and they think Hurin and Hura are lost.
And if you want to pull up the map,
sure.
I had to sort of visualize this as I was. So Turgon with the elves of Gondolin and some of them, the remaining warriors from Heathlam, from Fingon's army, go through. They're moving southwest away from Angband, and until they reach the river Revel. So the Fen of Sarek and the river Revel is where the men make their stand, and they cover for the elves. So the elves follow the river down through the pass, while the men hold the rear guard at the river Revel, at the top of the river Revel. And so the elves then escape past Tol Sirion and then into the mountains and back to Gondolin. So they kind of curve. They go southwest down through the pass, and they curve around and disappear into the mountains. So southwest, other way, I think.
Right over here.
Yep. So they disappear into the mountains. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's the top of the river Revel. Had the stream of the no, it's just the stream. So yeah, the elves disappear into the mountains, and they make their way back to Gondolin. So Turgon and his forces survive this day, and the men do not. So Huor and Hurin continue the fighting retreat until finally, with their backs against the river, they decide to move no more. And there's this great sort of Beowulfian scene where Huor first is killed with a venomed arrow in his eye.
Oh, I love that. Sorry, the particular. It's like he wasn't just killed. Like Tolkien was like, he killed him in the eye. Like that's cinematic. Like
and I mean, if you take an arrow into the eye, I don't think it needs to be venom to kill you, but but nevertheless,
Probably
Tolkien feels the need to make it a venom arrow
too.
as well. So, and then all of the men of Hardar. So everyone dies until we're just down to Hurin. And he cast aside his shield. Last of all, Hurin stood alone. Then he cast aside his shield and wielded an axe two-handed.
I love this scene, man.
And it is sung that the axe smoked in the black blood of the troll guard of Gothmog. So you have this Gothmog just sort of standing back and sending in his troll guard. Until it withered, that's the axe. And each time he slew, Hurin cried, Aure and Tuluva, day shall come again. 70 times he uttered that cry. So he took down 70 trolls with an axe.
That's awesome.
It's pretty awesome. And that's like at least a 10-minute battle scene in a movie. But they took him at last alive by the command of Morgoth. For the orcs grappled him with their hands, which clung to him, though he hewed off their arms, and ever their numbers were renewed until the last he fell buried beneath him.
This whole scene is asking for like the HBO treatment, like it's brutal.
Exactly.
Just to see, like, I would, oh man.
Oh, as an HBO Max special, this would
just the scene. Let's just see the scene of Hurin and Hura fighting, and I guess it's sad, and you know there's no hope at the end of this, but man, what a great scene.
But this is the essence of the this is Anglo-Saxon. This is a Beowulf scene to its max, which is that there is no hope. You will die, and you will. But the question is, how will you die? And the hero dies like warriors do, and in this case, he doesn't. That's the sad part, is that Morgoth wants to torture him, and he does. But in his final scene, which should have been his death scene. He goes down killing unbelievable amounts of foes, taking them with him.
Yeah, man. And we'll meet Hurin again. In fact, it is later. So at this point, Morgoth, right? He won. Essentially, the Eldar are now scattered. Feanor's kids have no more kingdoms. They took to a wild and woodland life beneath the feet of arid Linden, mingling with the green elves. So if you look at the map here, right, arid Linden, right, Linden.
All the way down. Keep going.
Down.
Keep going. There it is.
Oh, there it is.
Parentheses.
Sorry, yeah. I just wasn't do it. Yeah. So anyway, right here, Linden. There. Sorry, right below Assyrian. I mean, all the way from up here, right? There's no more Maedhros up here. There's nothing here. They just retreat hundreds of miles all the way down to Linden, right. And they've got nothing left, right? What Feanor said, which is like he knew Morgoth they'd never be able to beat him, like his children would never be able to beat him. And now, not only haven't beaten him, they've been destroyed completely.
Yep. So they're completely. I mean, they're gone from most of Balerion. They're just in the bottom southeast corner of Balerion now, huddling them with the green elves. All the other elven strongholds and lands of men are swept over in time anyway. Mm-hmm. First Heathlam, and then all the lands around Doriath. Doriath hasn't gone down yet. No. Gondolin, of course, is hidden them in the mountains, and so he doesn't. Morgoth doesn't know where it is, and so that's gone. But he's taken everything. He doesn't know where Nargothrond is, so that's still a haven, but that's it. No lands around Nargothrond are owned. And then finally, the elves of Breathumbar and Eglarest, which are Círdan's elves on the coast. They have, if our listeners remember, they had walled cities on the coast, which had withstood Morgoth's armies in the past. Not so this time. Morgoth brings smiths and masters of fire, and they blow the walls apart. Also a parallel to the Battle of Helm's Deep,
where the wall engines, he says.
Yes,
Tolkien hated the engines.
Yes, he did. So Círdan takes the remnants of his people into the Bay of Balar, the island of Balar, which is down at the bottom southwest of the map. So the elves have basically, aside from Doriath and the two cities of Nargothrond and Gondolin, the elves have been completely blown out of Balerion, and the men. It's all Morgoth's. He's won. He owns everything, but he is not happy. And I quote: "Now the thought of Morgoth dwelt ever upon Turgon, for Turgon had escaped him of all his foes, that one whom he most desired to take or destroy." And that's interesting, because I didn't realize that when the first time I was reading, like, why does he care about Turgon? Like, Turgon's just the son of Fingolfin, so what? Second son, big deal. Of all the elves, you care most about this, but it gives us insight into the life of Morgoth. So flashback to Morgoth back in Valinor.
I forgot to tell you.
Yeah. And most of all his kin, Morgoth feared Turgon, for of old in Valinor, his eye had lighted upon him, and whenever he drew near, a shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden from Turgon, ruin should come to him. That's him being Morgoth.
Yeah.
So,
which is a parallel to what Hurin told Tuor, or Hurin told Turgon.
Perhaps a joined prophecy. So, the prophetic spirit is, so Morgoth himself, he really wants to get at Turgon, so he decides to torture Hurin, the Rambo-like character who just did his Beowulfian last stand. And it is said briefly in here, in Silmarillion, but actually my favorite passage from the Unfinished Tales is the expounding of what I'm about to read in brief. Therefore, Hurin was brought before Morgoth, for Morgoth knew that he had the friendship of the king of Gondolin. But Hurin defied him and mocked him. Then Morgoth cursed Hurin and Morwen and their offspring, and set a doom upon them of darkness and sorrow. And taking Hurin from the prison, he set him in a chair of stone upon a high place of Thangorodrim. There he was bound by the power of Morgoth. And Morgoth, standing beside him, cursed him yet again, and he said, "Sit there now there, and look out upon the lands where evil and despair shall come upon those whom thou lovest. Thou hast dared to mock me and question the power of Melkor, master of the fates of Arda. Therefore with my eyes thou shalt see, and with my ears thou shalt hear, and never shalt thou move from this place until all is fulfilled into its better end." And even so it came to pass. But it is not said that Hurin ever asked of Morgoth either mercy or death for himself or for any of his kin. So that's a dramatic statement, right? But it's even better in the Unfinished Tales when we hear the actual dialogue between Morgoth and Hurin. So maybe we can, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the end of this chapter, but I thought at the very end we could read that passage. I have it pulled up between Morgoth and Hurin from the Unfinished Tales.
Yeah, if you have it.
It's pretty awesome.
Let's go there. I mean, let's close with that. The one thing that struck me here is that by command of Morgoth, they gathered all the bodies up and they put them in a great pile and they put them in the midst of the Enfauglith. And even though it was meant to be probably like a sign, a warning against all the people, all the elves coming to them, what happens to that hill of slain, as it's called? Mm-hmm. Grass came there and grew again, long and green, alone in all the desert that Morgoth had made, and no creature of Morgoth trod thereafter upon the earth, beneath which the swords of the Eldar and the Edain crumbled into rust. And I love that, like, even there, like, I think that's like LOTR, like going like, no, my hand is still here. There is still good, and you cannot, even in death, there is good in these here. I'm going to remind you. You put this out in front of you as a reminder to everybody else, but now I'm going to remind you
but it is,
life will survive.
Yeah, I love that too, and it is very interesting. It's like a last sort of moment check to the power of Morgoth. That the Haud and Nirnaeth, which is the Hill of Tears, there is but it is still a sad and I mean more. It's like a place out of an Edgar Allan Poe a poem, and Ted Naismith does an amazing picture of it years later when the wife Rhiann, the wife of Huor, comes to look for him and finds the Haud in Nirnaeth. So I don't know if it's going to pick it up, but here is.
There you go. Yeah. Whoa. That's brutal. The bones, the birds. Is it green? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is green. Okay. It's hard. Yeah. I know it's hard to tell with this. Yeah. It's like green gray. So it's kind of a green gray. Wow. And with the bones, the birds, it's pretty amazing painting of that place with all of its sorrow and power. So yep, the elves have lost. This is the I won't say that the doom of Fëanor is fully unfolded, because we'll see that with the final fate of his sons, but but it is their power has been broken in Middle Earth. The Noldor are a shattered remnant. In fact, all the elves, not just the Noldor, the Sindar and the Green Elves, everyone, the men have been destroyed. And Morgoth is, as Charlie Sheen would say, winning.
That's a deep cut. I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah, sorry for the 20-year deep cut there.
That's all right. That's all right. All right. Well, let's close this out. Let's read that interchange that you have up from Unfinished Tales. What's the story called in Unfinished Tales? Do you have that in front of you?
It's called The Words, and it's The Words of Hurin and Morgoth, the Narn Ihin Hurin, The Words of Hurin and Morgoth. And it'll take me a couple minutes to read, so apologies to those people that can't stand the sound of my voice, because it's an actual dialogue between them.
Just channel James Earl Jones.
Now I'm just going to screw it up. Thanks for telling me that. So here we go, Unfinished Tales, but it is a fantastic quote. There's some Hurin gets in some real well, you'll see. Hurin was brought before Morgoth, for Morgoth knew by his arts and his spies that Hurin had the friendship of the king of Gondolin, and he sought to daunt him with his eyes. But Hurin could not yet be daunted, and he defied Morgoth. Therefore Morgoth had him chained and set in slow torment. But after a while he came to him and offered him his choice to go free whither he would, or to receive power and rank as the greatest of Morgoth's captains, if he would but reveal where Turgon had his stronghold, and aught else that he knew of the king's counsels. But Hurin the steadfast mocked him, saying, "Blind are you, Morgoth Bauglir, and blind shall you ever be, seeing only the dark. You know not what rules the hearts of men, and if you knew, you could not give it. But a fool is he who accepts what Morgoth offers. You will take first the price, then withhold the promise, and I should get only death if I told you what you ask." By the way, I'm going to stop there for a second and say, it's a beautiful line. You know not what rules the hearts of men, and if you knew, you could not give it. This is a reference to the actual fate of Iluvatar, like the power of Iluvatar in the hearts of men, that Morgoth can't give what men really desire, which is their creator. So then Morgoth laughed, and he said, "Death you may yet crave from me as a boon." Then he took Hurin to the Haud and Nirnaeth. So, by the way, it doesn't say this in the Silmarillion, but he takes Hurin to that hill that we saw the picture
of all the dead elves.
Yes, and he puts him on top of the hill. As it was then new built, and the reek of death was upon it, and Morgoth set Hurin upon its top, and bade him look west towards Heathlam, and think of his wife and his son and other kin. "For they now dwell in my realm," said Morgoth, "and they are at my mercy." "You have none," answered Hurin, "but you will not come at Turgon through them, for they do not know his secrets." Then wrath mastered Morgoth, and he said, "Yet I may come at you and all your accursed house, and you shall be broken on my will, though you all be made of steel." And then he took up a long sword that lay there, and broke it before the eyes of Hurin, and a splinter wounded his face, but Hurin did not blench. Then Morgoth stretched out his long arm towards Dor Lomine, cursed Hurin and Morwen and their offspring, saying, "Behold, the shadow of my thought shall lie upon them wherever they go, and my hate shall pursue them to the ends of the world." And by the way, we will see some of that, the effects of that curse in the next chapter. But Hurin said, "You speak in vain, for you cannot see them, nor govern them from afar, not while you keep this shape, and desire still to be a king visible upon the earth." So that line's really interesting. He says, "You cannot see them or govern them from afar, not while you keep this shape and desire still to be a king visible upon the earth." So he's actually referencing the fact that Morgoth is locked into his body and has lessened himself. Even though he's a Valar, he's lessened himself by doing what he's done. And Hurin is pointing out that Morgoth can't actually see Hurin's kin. Then Morgoth turned upon Hurin, and he said, "Fool, little among men, and they are the least of all that speak. Have you seen the Valar, or measured the power of Manwë and Varda? Do you know the reach of their thought? Or do you think perhaps that their thought is upon you, and that they may shield you from afar?" "I know not," said Hurin. "Yet so it might be if they willed, for the elder king shall not be dethroned while Arda endures." "You say it," said Morgoth. "I am the elder king, Melkor, first and mightiest of the Valar, who was before the world and made it. The shadow of my purpose lies upon Arda, and all that is in it bends slowly and surely to my will. But upon all whom you love, my thought shall weigh as a cloud of doom, and it shall bring them down into darkness and despair. Wherever they go, evil shall arise. Whenever they speak, their words shall bring ill counsel. Whatsoever they do shall turn against them. They shall die without hope, cursing both life and death. But Hurin answered, Do you forget to whom you speak? Such things you spoke long ago to our fathers, but we escaped from your shadow. And now we have knowledge of you, for we have looked upon the faces that have seen the light, and have heard the voices that have spoken with Manwë. Before Arda you were, but others also, and you did not make it. Neither are you the most mighty, for you spent your strength upon yourself, and wasted it in your own emptiness. No more are you now than an escaped thrall of the Valar, and their chain still awaits you. Oh, that's just an awesome line where this is a man who is doomed, and he's doomed to torment and maybe death, but just doomed. And he has the strength of will to not only defy Morgoth, but to point out all of his lies that he did not, despite Morgoth's claim, Morgoth did not create Arda. And that Morgoth is not even the most powerful of the Valar, for he wasted his strength upon himself and in his own emptiness. And that he calls him an escaped thrall of the Valar, and that their chain still awaits you. It's awesome. You have learned the lessons of your masters by rote, said Morgoth, but such childish lore shall not help you. Now they are all fled away. This last I say to you, thrall Morgoth, said Hurin, and it comes not from the lore of the Eldar, but is put into my heart in this hour, which is a reference to Iluvatar. You are not the lord of men, and shall not be, though all Arda and Menel fall in your domain. Beyond the circles of the world, you shall not pursue those who refuse you. Beyond the circles of the world, I will not pursue them, said Morgoth, for beyond the circles of the world there is nothing. But within them they shall not escape me until they enter into nothing. So to go back to what Hurin says, he says, you are not the lord of men and shall not be, though all Arda and Menel fall under your dominion. Menel is just the word for the air, the regions of the air. So Arda is the earth and Menel is the air. Beyond the circles of the world, you shall not pursue those who refuse you. And Morgoth says, well, yeah, I won't, because there's nothing beyond the circles of the world. But what actually Hurin has spoken there, beyond the circles of the world, you shall not pursue those who refuse you, is a prophecy, though Morgoth misses it. He doesn't understand it. But Hurin has just spoken a prophecy about Morgoth being chained into the timeless void, which is beyond the circles of the world. So his fate, Morgoth's fate, is to be chained, ultimately to be chained in the timeless void, and that he will not be able to pursue those who refuse him. So anyway, there's more, but I would encourage everyone to go and read the Unfinished Tales and it's a gorgeous dialogue, which for whatever reason Christopher Tolkien does not include in the Silmarillion.
This here it kind of doesn't fit within the Silmarillion as Christopher Tolkien wrote it. This is the best part of the tale that he wanted to tell, and he would have expanded outside from this here. You know, he started from the inside and he moved to the outside of the rest of the story. But he had the outline in what we read in the Silmarillion in chapter 20 there. But this here, right? This is the establishing of those two main characters in this kind of like if there was a story told of the Nirnaeth Arnoediad from Hurin's perspective, like here we have his voice and what he's like, and to see that whole thing from that perspective would have been great.
Exactly. And it's what's beautiful and I love about it. It's not its beauty actually, is the power of the darkness and the despair here. This is that heroic warrior's heroic end. So even though he's captured and even though he will never escape, there is no escape for Hurin. Nevertheless, he speaks and defies ultimate evil with his last voice. And that would be a fantastic ending to whatever movie or TV series might end with that, if they have the rights to do so and they have the fiber.
well, we'll see. I don't know. Nobody else can ever write like this today. I don't think we'll ever get anybody to capture this in a character outside of what Tolkien's written. So I kind of hope it just stays here and we don't have to see it bastardized by anybody who's trying hard.
I just keep hoping like somebody like I think we talked about this before it started, right? So Tolkien's work, we're going to talk about this more in the subscriber section, but Tolkien's work is 20 years away from entering the public domain, rather. Mm-hmm. And so in 20 years, it's going to be it's going to be the case that people can. I just keep hoping someone can take it and actually do it justice by using Tolkien's own words. I mean, what better way to do it? I mean, that's what Jackson did anyway. And so much of it, not all, but so much of what he wrote in the movies is he had a habit of actually going to the books, doing back to the books, which is all what turns out was complete baloney when it came to Rings of Power. But Jackson actually did that a lot, not everywhere, but he did that a lot. And if someone were to take and make the Fall of the Noldor into a season, I mean, it would make a great season of a TV series, or 5 seasons or whatever. It could finish with something like this. It could finish with that dialogue between Hurin and, because this is the end of the Noldor's power is broken in Middle Earth. I mean, there's more to tell, of course.
You'd have even a couple of other choices, like if you wanted to say maybe it ends with the defeat of Glaurung, right, which we'll see later. Sorry to spoil it for you, everybody. Like that might be another point that's true. This would be the end of one of the seasons, and then the end of the. There
are so many seasons that you could get out of this if someone actually got the.
We have made this go way too long. My goal when we started this podcast was to be like 30 to 45 minutes, and we're approaching like an hour. And
sorry, the last 10 minutes were my fault.
That's okay. Hey, maybe we'll just cut it out and put in the extended podcast. But that's what I mean. Anyway, we're going to move into that. So I'm going to say,
if you like Tolkien,
you should subscribe and get to the extended podcast, because we're going to talk some more about this sort of stuff. We're going to talk about the James Cameron talking Tolkien. We're talking about upcoming Middle Earth games. We're going to look at like. What do we do with Tolkien getting into the public domain and people changing, making him less problematic? And then some other questions from some of our patrons, which you can get if you go to theonering.com/patron. You can join us in Discord, and where we have monthly, video chats. We all get together and talk about what we've read, life, and the struggles, the evil in our own lives that we have to deal with. I don't know what we talk about. We talk about a bunch of stuff, but a lot of what we read is dealt with in there, and it's really a lot of fun to see everybody in person and have a face-to-face chat. So join us there, theonering.com/patron, or click the it's way over there, I think. Click the join button next to the subscribe button, and you can also get access through Discord through a YouTube membership, which it's a lot easier, I guess, because you don't have to put in your credit card again if you've already used it once. But hey, go do that if you like Tolkien. So we're going to jump into our extended podcast. So thanks for joining us, and as Michael likes to say, you freeloaders, we'll see you next week.
Bye, freeloaders.